The theme for this third week of Advent is rejoicing. But can we truly rejoice at this time? For some of us, this may feel impossible. If we are facing difficulties, suffering, or personal struggles, the question arises, how can I rejoice? We often feel an inevitable joy as Christmas approaches. The excitement of the season fills the air. But how do we reconcile that joy with our pain, suffering, or worries? How can we celebrate when life feels so heavy? This is the irony of Christmas. We live in a broken world, a world where goodness and peace often seem overshadowed by pain and darkness. Yet Christmas is the celebration of God's presence among us, a reminder that even in our brokenness, Emmanuel, God with us, is near. Still, the question remains, how do we rejoice when our hearts are burdened? Rejoicing in the midst of suffering. In the first reading, the prophet Zephaniah calls out to a people enduring great suffering. These were people exiled from their homeland, stripped of freedom and forced into slavery. And yet, the prophet exhorts them to shout for joy and sing joyfully as the day of the Lord approaches. His message is clear. Even in the darkest of times, lift up your heads and rejoice, for God is near. Similarly, John the Baptist prepared the people for the first Christmas during a time of oppression under the Roman Empire and the corrupt reign of King Herod. These were dark and painful times for the Jewish people, yet it was in this very context that the Savior was born, a beacon of hope in the midst of suffering. Reflections on the Story of Mary Netflix recently released a film called Mary. Have you seen it? While the movie takes some creative liberties and does not strictly adhere to the scriptures or church tradition, it offers an interesting portrayal of Mary, Joseph, and the birth of Jesus. The movie captures the deep shadow of darkness surrounding the Holy Family during the time of the Annunciation, Joseph's call to take Mary as his wife, and Jesus' birth. It vividly illustrates a world overwhelmed by evil, suffering, violence, and poverty. A broken world not so different from ours today. Even Mary and Joseph, chosen by God, were not spared from pain and hardship. Yet the birth of the Savior in this brokenness brings glad tidings, peace, and joy. The movie highlights the Holy Family's devotion and perseverance in faith, reminding us that true rejoicing does not mean the absence of suffering, but the presence of hope and trust in God. What must we do? In the Gospel, people come to John the Baptist with a straightforward question. What must we do? John's answer is simple yet profound. Turn back to God and live in righteousness. True joy and peace can only be found in God. John advises his listeners, regardless of their status or past sins, to embrace integrity, charity, and a return to God's ways. As we prepare for Christmas, this same call applies to us. Our preparation should not only involve external decorations or festivities, but also acts of charity toward the poor and suffering. A call to reconciliation. This week, many parishes will offer opportunities for the sacrament of reconciliation. I encourage you to take advantage of this grace-filled moment to turn back to God. In this sacrament, we experience healing from sin and reconciliation with God and others, a reason to truly rejoice. Rejoicing may not remove our struggles or end our suffering, but it prepares us for Christmas, a time when Christ's coming brings hope, peace, and joy, even in the shadow of darkness. Let us trust in God's presence, who is with us in our trials, and rejoice as we await the celebration of His birth.